We got
If you guys
Sir.
don't mind, I'm going to drop everybody from the panel and we're going to get on to the next debate.
Yeah, let's get on to the main event. Drop all these
Hi,
undercarders.
Sir.
Get them all out of here. Get this Kunta, get this Logic, get these undercards out of here. We're ready for the main event.
Okay. Angel, I will see you
Can I be
later.
quiet for one time?
Okay, you can be here for the debate, but you do have to remain on mute so we don't interrupt the integrity of the debate that's going on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hey, sir, how you feeling?
I'm pretty good. Excited
Good,
to have
good.
some dialogue with Jern. Why am I at the bottom
Um,
of the guest book?
um, I'm not sure. I think like whatever box you hit when you are requesting to come up is where you're gonna land. So whichever one you poke on your screen.
I'm having connection. Am I having connection issues?
Yes, you
You're
are.
breaking up a little bit.
Yeah,
Damn it! I'm gonna
a lot
reset my
bit.
modem and come right back.
Okay, definitely. We can wait
Modem
for you
reset.
for 10 minutes. Just take your time. And honestly, we have like 3 minutes left, so the debate doesn't start till 8 o'clock. But whenever I schedule these events, I do have a cushion, so the debate should be starting between 8 and 8:20. There is a 20-minute cushion,
We got
just
three
in case
minutes.
any minor inconveniences. But Christ before Jesus, it's an honor to have you. Thank you for being here. How do you
Thank
feel for
you.
this upcoming debate?
How do I feel?
Yeah, how do you feel?
I'm perfectly fine.
Okay. How's your day going? You doing all right today?
Yeah, it's going all right. It's going all right. Spent the spent the day with the family, just kind of hanging out at my parents' house.
Definitely, definitely. That's pretty cool. We're happy
Which,
to
by the
have
way,
you.
I don't live at my parents' house. I went to my parents' house with with my kids. I want to preface by saying that I do not live in my mom's basement.
Okay, okay, definitely. It's important to clarify that for the audience. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Just in case anybody was wondering, I do not live in my mom's basement. I live in I live in Precept Mars's mom's basement.
Oh, snap. Wow, that's wow. Well, uh, we might want to check out those living conditions. Make
Oh, they're
sure that
terrible. They're terrible.
um,
It must be some sort of timeshare situation because that's also where I live, and I don't remember ever seeing you sitting on the couch.
okay,
No,
but
I don't spend much time on the couch. I'm usually in her bedroom.
okay. Actually,
That
wait, hold
could
on, hold
that
on.
could be why. That could
Yeah,
be why. You're right.
no, okay. Maybe we shouldn't talk about Precept Mars's mother or anything. Or actually, yes. Let's
No,
remain
it's not.
professional. Let's not go too far.
It's not.
Um,
Oh,
Precept Mars
I'm
is not here
very
to defend
professional.
herself. But we're waiting for Sir.
What here? Just oh, there he is.
Is
There
that
we go.
better?
Okay. Yeah, we hear you loud and clear. So yeah, everyone, this is going to be the second debate. We're about to get started. Was Jesus a historical figure? Sir is going to be debating Christ before Jesus, and we're going to get started here. This is going to be one of the longer debates. It's going to be a 1 hour debate in order to cover more information. There's going to be 9 minute openers. There's going to be 2 rounds of cross examinations. They're going to be 8 minutes, and then there's going to be 5 minute closers for both of the guests. Um, Sir is going to be the affirmation. He's affirming that Jesus did, in fact, exist historically and was a historical figure. So you're going to get the first 9 minute opener. And I can start the timer whenever you're ready, or whenever you say your first word, I'll start the timer.
The big box then.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, thanks Coco. Thanks Jay. Thanks Sharon for having this discussion. I want to clear up some confusion that I generally see surrounding this topic. First, I just want to point out we are discussing whether or not Jesus was a historical figure. We're not discussing whether he did miracles. I don't believe he did. We're not discussing whether or not he rose from the dead. I don't believe he did. We're not discussing whether or not he was a god, whether his mother was a virgin. I don't believe any of those things. We're not even necessarily discussing if, for example, he converted a tax collector named Matthew. I even have my doubts about that. What we are discussing is whether or not there was a Jewish preacher of sorts named Jesus in the first century, executed under Pontius Pilate, and later his followers developed seeds of proto-Christianity about this man. As time went on, the legends about him grew, and that's how we get the stories we have that we generally associate with Jesus. If you agree with that general summary, you're not a mythicist. If you think Jesus existed by his followers as a pre-existent God or divine being, and the historical stuff about him was developed later, in other words, the other way around, then you are a mythicist. This is really what this debate is over. I want to give a few reasons why my position is much more likely, but before I do, I need to clarify how we ought to get there. Let's first talk about parsimony. Parsimony is a term used both in probability assessment and historical studies to refer to an explanation that has the least moving parts or is the simplest. Think, for example, of an analogy with Abraham Lincoln. If someone were to posit that Abraham Lincoln had a twin brother that gave all his speeches and that the real Abraham Lincoln was behind closed doors and signed all his documents, that might technically fit all the available evidence, but it has too many moving parts to be most parsimonious. Therefore, the twin theory would be less likely than the actual singular Abraham Lincoln theory. The second term we need to explain is reference class. This is used to determine what group, a pattern, an individual, or event belongs to. Once we can establish this, we can see if the evidence is similar to other people or events that belong in that group. For example, if I wanted to determine in the 1800s if someone was president, I wouldn't be looking for video footage of that person because we don't have that evidence for other people in that group. And similarly, I wouldn't use the evidence for the people in that group for people outside of that group, such as looking for White House documents that someone was a coal miner in the 1800s. And the last terms I want to go over here are going to be prior and post probability. Prior probability is the probability something happened before we examine the evidence, and post probability is the likelihood after examining the evidence. We have several examples in antiquity of historical figures having legends attached to them. In fact, if you have a book written about you, that's pretty much what happened. Stories and legends made it into the book. We don't have any examples of this happening with a non-historical figure that is in recent contemporary memory, at least no examples that I've ever been made aware of. This makes the background knowledge surrounding Jesus as a historical figure really high that he existed. Okay, now that I have all that set aside, what reference class ought Jesus belong to? There have been different ideas proposed by scholars, but the most common is going to be something like a first century Jewish apocalyptic preacher or sign prophet. If we want to, we could even go broader and just put them in the reference class of first century Palestinian historical figures. It doesn't really matter which class we assign him to of those three, because the evidence we have for Jesus in most cases far surpasses those other figures. Given that the evidence for Jesus is on par with these other figures in most cases, or exceeds them, and given that we don't have any examples of someone making up someone like Jesus in contemporary memory in the first, second, or even third century, the prior probability for Jesus is very, very high. So we'd actually need really good evidence that he didn't exist. Now going over the evidence next, I want to point out that each pieces of these evidence are going to raise the prior probability and make the post probability even higher that he existed. Here's a few of those pieces of evidence. He's mentioned by the historian Josephus. He's contained in New Testament documents that contain biographies and lives about him, as well as letters from a follower who claims to know one of his brothers. There are several competing groups arguing over various details about him, such as whether he came from an angel, whether he was a god or a messianic human, whether Judas was all part of the plan, or whether he betrayed Jesus unjustly, whether Gentiles should be allowed in the religion, etc. But they all seem to agree that a man was crucified by Pontius Pilate. Every Christian and Gnostic group agrees on this detail, and this detail might be the most embarrassing of all, because they were not looking for a crucified Messiah. And we also have several early second century references to Jesus and his followers that he is the one where the religion originated from a man that was crucified, and that man was called Christ. Suetonius and Tacitus mention this, as well as Pliny the Younger mentions interacting with people who were worshiping a Christ figure, and that's the name reserved for a Jewish Messiah. Now, the very last point I just want to make is that in order for my theory to be most likely, I only need one of these to be correct. Jaron needs his interpretation of all these pieces of data to be correct. For example, if I'm wrong about Josephus and Josephus doesn't mention Jesus, it doesn't matter, because any of these pieces of evidence would be enough to establish that Jesus was most likely a historical figure. But Jesus needs to poke holes and show that all of them are wrong. And that's all my time.
Okay, I'm stopping your time there. And you had 3 minutes and 42 seconds left on the clock. That will conclude Sir's opening statement. Christ before Jesus, your opening statement is going to be 9 minutes, just like Sir's, and I will start your time whenever you say your first word.
Okay. I've got 9 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't need but about 4 minutes in order to prove that Jesus didn't exist. So for the first 5 minutes, I'm going to eat this sandwich.
I guess, yeah, you're free to do whatever you want to do with your time.
Thank you. Need a drink. You know what? I'll go ahead and start. All right. Ah, boy. Even the natural Jesus, as presented by the New Testament, did not exist. The supernatural stories of Jesus come from prior deities, such as Serapis, Dionysus, Asclepius, Orion. The natural stories of Jesus come from prior works such as the Septuagint and the works of Josephus. Most notably, Wars of the Jews, not so much Antiquities of the Jews, against Apion and his autobiography, Vita. There are anachronisms, geographical errors, contradictions among the Gospels, complete and total misunderstandings of the Jewish messianic prophecies, and the New Testament wasn't written until the 2nd century. The first books published are published by a man who didn't think that Jesus was a real human being. There's not a single verse in the New Testament where the author states that they were present for the life of Jesus. Every story of Jesus is presented in third-person omniscient. Multiple teachings of Jesus are lifted from a book known as the Wisdom of Sirach, written and found in the Catholic Bible, by the way. It is written in the early 2nd century BCE by a man named Jesus ben Sirach. So if you want to say that there's the Jesus who we all know of, that this is based on, sure, you go ahead. I mean, Josephus mentions at least 4 or 5, but that would just be a Jesus in name only, or a Gino, as I like to call them, because they have nothing to do with the Jesus of the New Testament. Ancient historians are of no use, seeing as interpolations and edits abound. The oldest manuscript we have of Tacitus is the 9th century. The oldest manuscript of Josephus is the 11th, both kept by the Catholic Church, by the way. And Jesus is not mentioned by Pliny the Elder, Philo, Justus, Seneca, or any other 1st century author that we know of. The first time Jesus is definitively mentioned by a non-Christian is Lucian of Samosata in roughly about 166. And he says that a patricidal con man named Proteus grifted the Christians and wrote books for them in the middle of the 2nd century. He also wrote letters to different cities, according to Lucian of Samosata. Jesus is a mythological character with a supernatural birth story in only 2 of the first 6 Gospels written. And even those 2 contradict each other on their narratives. Even the natural Jesus, as presented by the New Testament, did not exist. I am aware that I am in the minority currently. The vast majority of historians and scholars will tell you that Jesus probably existed or don't have an issue with his existence. By far the most common take of Jesus is that the natural person who didn't do any miracles existed. But despite the fact that nearly all religious scholars are religious themselves, work for religious institutions, or get their funding from religious organizations or religious students, a growing number of scholars who are sympathetic to mythicism and to the idea of second century authorship of the New Testament is starting to show its head. As a data scientist, I'm sure many of you are aware of the term stellometry and have heard me use it. I'm going to try to refrain from talking about stellometry because unless I have been wrong for the last couple months or last couple days preparing for this particular debate, I don't think Sir has read my book or has done the data science himself on the actual text. So I don't want to appeal to something that he doesn't necessarily potentially agree to. I have no idea. And we'll get more into that in the future as this debate goes on. But again, Jesus just absolutely, my take is that he is a mythological character written by people who are not Jewish in the 2nd century. Good to go.
Okay, ending the time right there. And you had 2 minutes and 53 seconds left over. So we're going to proceed to cross-examinations. Sir, you're going to start off with your first round, 8-minute cross-examination. I'll start the timer when you say your first word.
So I have 8 minutes to control the convo, is that right?
Yes, you can talk or you can make ask any questions you want.
Okay, Jaron, do you think any of the texts about Jesus or in the 1st century said that the first person that mentioned Jesus as a human is Lucian, correct?
Could you repeat the question?
Do you think any of the texts about Jesus are in the 1st century?
No.
Okay. So your interpretation of Mark 13, from what I understand from your book, is that it's about the Bar Kokhba revolt. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. In Mark 13, it presents the desolation sacrilege. That's primarily the reason why you interpret this book to be after the Bar Kokhba revolt, because after the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jewish temple was replaced with a pagan temple. Is that correct?
No.
What's your reason for thinking that
That's
Mark
part of my
13 is
reason.
talking?
That's part of my reason. The on the Temple Mount, Emperor Hadrian erected a statue on the Temple Mount. Not only this is mentioned by Jerome as what Mark was talking about, it is also the fact that my stance is also based on the fact that it says to flee Judea, which wouldn't be what you would do during the siege of Jerusalem specifically. Emperor Hadrian laid waste to all of Judea and renamed it to Roman Palestina. So in Mark, when it says you see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not, in other words, as Jerome said, the Temple Mount, flee Judea. And that would be Bar Kokhba revolt, not just 70. There were still Jews in Judea in 70.
Okay, so Mark 13, when it makes this sort of eschatological prediction about the coming of God and about the desecration sacrilege, it does all this and says it's going to occur in the lifetime of the disciples. But when we get to the later gospels, such as Luke and the Evangelion, which I'm going to say is after Mark, it changes the context. In Luke, for example, the kingdom of God has already arrived. It's not a future event. Luke references the kingdom of God as being an ongoing event that's here currently. Also, Luke changes the context of the desolation sacrilege to being the army surrounding Jerusalem. This, to me, points to a failed prophecy in Mark, meaning that Mark is arguing that this event is going to happen in the lifetime of the disciples, and given that that event didn't occur, the later gospel writers have to change the context of what's being talked about in Mark 13. Why would you say that that theory is wrong?
Because the Gospel of Mark, generally speaking, each individual line or each sentence, or the majority of them, start with the word and or and then, the Greek word kai, written as a play. If this is a play in specific that is presented to people who are listening to the gospel as the initiation for this mystery cult known as Christianity, then explaining to the audience in specific that Jesus is somehow going to save you, or the kingdom will be here while you are still present, would be the reason why they would do that. For Luke, it's not a play. They're actually attempting to put Jesus into a particular time frame and make him historical. Luke and Matthew both have birth stories where Mark doesn't. Mark is more than likely just a play version of the gospel from Marcion, or pronounced Markion when he was alive, or in ancient Rome. And Markion just means little Mark. So most likely this is just a play version, and later on they're actually trying to historicize the deity.
Yeah, but in Mark 13, he's talking to the disciples directly. He's not talking to the audience.
They would be addressing the audience, like that's a line that's been said. So the audience would be impacted by the play.
But it still stands to reason that in Mark 13, Jesus is addressing the disciples directly and tells them an event that's going to occur that doesn't, correct?
You mean the kingdom coming or the second coming, or what are you talking about? Yeah. It ultimately doesn't. No, but
that
to
event
the
did not
people who
occur
are listening to the play,
Wait.
they believe that it would be.
Hold on, Jaron, please. That event did not occur in the disciples' lifetime or in the first century before the Boculpa revolt. Do you agree?
Correct.
Okay, so why would, if Mark was written in the second century, why would Mark have Jesus speaking a failed prediction of people that he knows won't occur?
Because the people who he's addressing are the audience. That's the point.
Jesus,
the people who would be
Mark
listening
13,
to it.
I implore anyone to read Mark 13. He's talking to the disciples.
I'm aware. The audience is going to be listening to this play.
Okay, but in context of the story, he's talking to the disciples, right?
In the context of the story, yeah. I mean, if we want to jump into the context of the story, then
your theory is
I
that
guess all of it happens.
Your theory is that Mark wrote a failed prophecy in his book because the kingdom of God did not come in the disciples' lifetime.
No, what I'm saying is that my theory is that this particular play that was put on for the initiates of the Christianity mystery cult heard that this teaching, in specific, this kingdom would be coming for them. That's the point. The play loses itself. Mark 13 isn't even technically written by the same author as the rest of it. Now, of course, that gets into stellometry, which I don't think we should probably get into unless we really want to have a data set.
Well, we can if that's what you want to talk about.
Well,
I mean,
not necessarily, but nevertheless, my theory does not hinge on the idea that Mark 13 is somehow a failed prophecy or anything like that. That has no effect on the theory that I have.
Well, it does, because if it's a failed prophecy, we would expect the person not to bring it up in his book if he's writing in the second century.
Unless he is writing to the audience. I mean, the story itself. The story itself, you'd also have to wonder why the original version of Mark ends with the women at the tomb just completely frozen in fear and doesn't explain that Jesus actually rose or did anything, really. And there's no post-resurrection scenes. Why would that be the case if they believed this in 70?
Yeah, there's a simple explanation for that. It does indicate there's going to be post-resurrection. For one, it says that Jesus is going to appear to Peter in Galilee. And Mark is writing a lot of polemics against the family and the people that knew Jesus during his lifetime. And I think this also points to a first century date, because if we compare Mark and Matthew, there seems to be a bit of tug of war going on between people that were following the teachings of the people that knew Jesus versus the people that were following the teachings of Paul. And Mark is writing on the Pauline side of the schism. So it's fully expected that Mark wouldn't present post-resurrection stories, because those are going to be to the people that knew Jesus during his lifetime.
You are very correct. The Gospel of Mark is based off of Marcion, and Marcion's New Testament had his Gospel Evangeline along with 10 books written in the style of letters attributed to a man named Paul. Of course, Mark is going to be very aligned with Paul. Of course it is. Despite the fact that apparently, according to church tradition, Mark did not follow Paul. Mark followed Peter.
Yeah, no, that tradition's obviously wrong.
Yes, because they were trying to rebrand Mark as late as... Sentence? Yeah, so
what did
Mark
you say?
was trying to be rebranded.
That would be the end of the round, so finish your last sentiments.
No, I think it's, he could take his turn now. I think that's it for the Gospels.
Oh, okay. And Christ before Jesus, it's now your turn for your first round of cross-examination. You can ask whatever questions that you want or talk the entire time. I'll start the 8 minutes whenever you say your first word.
Sure. So a particular a particular thing that you had mentioned in there was that there was an embarrassing act that was talked about for the crucifixion. The crucified Messiah, you said, wouldn't be what the Jews were looking for. Do you
Correct,
hold to the criterion of embarrassment there?
I don't know if I would specifically word it that way. I think it's similar to like kind of that criterion that Urban presents, but I think it would be less expected to see such a story survive the tradition. Yeah.
Okay. Are you aware at all as to the stories of Greek gods who got their junk ripped off that were still worshipped?
Yeah. So what?
Okay. So very clearly, embarrassing moments aren't necessarily indicative of people who are trying to tell a true story. That's just kind of part of literature back then.
That wasn't my argument, though. My argument is that
ultimately, I'm just trying to make sure that the term embarrassing in specific wasn't used to imply that because it was embarrassing, it somehow adds to the validity of the story. I'm trying to make sure
what
that
I'm
that's
saying
not what
is,
you try to do.
yeah, there might be some general embarrassing detail that can't be applied unilaterally. I agree with you there. But when we're talking specifically in the context of what the Jewish figures that we're talking about here were looking for, they weren't looking for a crucified Messiah. And this story seems to transcend all the traditions among Gnostics and Jewish Christians, so including the Ebionites. So the fact that this crucified story the tradition made it into all these different sort of Christian cults, to me raises the probability that that's a real event that occurred.
Other than church tradition and the Bible, where are you getting the idea that the earliest Christians were Jewish?
Well, the fact that they're talking about a Messiah.
Who's they?
The people in the Bible. That's what the story's about. It's about a Jewish Messiah.
So you're just saying you're basing it off of the Bible that they're Jewish?
Well, I don't know why else we'd have a story about a Jewish Messiah unless it came from some Jewish tradition. They seem to be trying
the only way that people would be familiar with Judaism and want to work with that as their narrative for a story is if they're Jewish themselves.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Are you saying that outside of the Bible and church tradition, we don't have, like for instance, do we have any Jews who said that Christianity was more or less a sect of Judaism that split off? Do we have any early Jews who say that?
No.
Okay. Do we have any Romans who say that Christianity split off from Judaism?
No, but I don't know what Romans would mention that.
You don't think that Pliny the Younger would have mentioned this 3 years before the Kitos War when he runs into them in northern Asia Minor in 111?
No, why would
he? When he runs into the Christians in 111 and writes a letter to the emperor in literally the very middle of the Jewish-Roman wars, if he ran into some group in northern Asia Minor sympathetic, at least in some part, to the Jewish cause, or familiar or worshiping a Jewish person, he wouldn't mention that?
The point of Pliny's letter to Trajan wasn't to talk about who the Christians were. It was to make sure that his method of prosecuting and punishing them was correct.
Correct. And
so I don't know.
Did they not have it since 70 specific rules that attacked the Jewish people? Like, for instance, the tax?
That I'm not aware of.
You're not aware of the tax that was levied against the Jewish people in 70 that said that you either had to worship the Roman gods or pay a tax?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Taxes,
very clearly they have rules specific to Jewish people and specific to people who are familiar with the Messiah and everything like that. If he ran into Christians who were somehow an offshoot of Judaism and Jewish in some form, whether or not ethnically or post-religiously or they just happened to worship a person who was Jewish, you don't think that Pliny would have mentioned this 3 years before the Second Jewish-Roman War?
I think if he did mention it, it wouldn't be surprising, and if he didn't, it wouldn't be that surprising either. We're trying to contextualize everything he said based
Right.
on one
Well,
letter, where the point of the letter
You
was to figure
you
out
said
who
that
was-
his point was to try to figure out how to deal with him. They had
Sure, yeah.
explicit rules that had been established since 70 on how to deal with anybody who was familiar or any Jews or anything like that. So what I'm trying to say here is that him saying that he's never dealt with them and him saying, I don't know how to proceed with this, indicates that they're very clearly not connected to Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I just don't think that's.
Well,
I don't
then
think
why on
that's
earth do
conclusive
you
enough.
think where? So again,
Wait.
my entire point. To bring up, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think it's a fair point to bring that up. I just don't think that's conclusive enough to conclude that.
But again, this fair point just goes to show that very clearly Romans could have been talking about Christianity as a Jewish offshoot. Do they ever say that?
No, and again, I don't know why we would expect that would
I just
necessarily be
explained
the
why we
case
would
that
say
they would.
that. Why we would see that.
Yeah, you gave an example where it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility
Mhm.
for Pliny to mention
Yeah.
this fact about these Jewish Christians, but you're not giving me a reason to motivate me to think he ought to, that he should have.
Okay. Does Suetonius talk about Jewish people?
Yeah.
Does Suetonius talk about Christians? Do you believe that he does?
I think, and one of the two references pointed to that reference is about Christians. I don't think the second one is
Okay.
the one that talks about Christians.
Does he mention that they are an offshoot of Judaism?
No.
Okay. Does Tacitus mention Jews?
Yes.
Does he mention Christians in your belief?
Yep.
Are they an offshoot of Judaism according to Tacitus?
He doesn't say.
Okay. Does Celsus mention Jews?
Well, we don't have what Celsus wrote. All we have is Origen interacting with him.
Cool. Do you believe that Celsus
So-
mentioned Jews, according, or at least according to what we have of him?
That I'm not sure. You tell me.
Yes, Celsus does. Starting at about 170, he tried to explain what the Jews, in specific, how they viewed Jesus.
So when Origen is
He
responding
does
to
not,
Celsus, do you
however,
think-
just so you know, mention that Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism.
Finish your final
But do
sentence.
you? Well, I was just going to respond and ask a question, and maybe he can answer, or if it has to, it can carry over to my time, whatever. But when
It
Origen,
sounds like I'm almost done here with mine. So ultimately, what
Or
I'm
actually-
trying to say here.
Oh, really quick,
Go ahead.
that would be the end of the round.
Oh,
but
was
sir-
that the end there? That second?
Yeah. But
Okay.
sir, now would begin your second cross-examination period. So you've got 8 minutes, and I can start that whenever you say your first word.
yeah. So do you think Josephus mentions Jesus at all?
Jesus of the New Testament? Yeah, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That's what you mean. No.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so let's take the book 18 reference out of the play for a minute, because I'm a bit agnostic on that one. But in book 20, when he referenced the execution of James, and associates him with Jesus and says Jesus was the one that was called the Christ, or the so-called Christ.
Mhm.
I imagine, what's your interpretation there in that passage? Do you think that's a Christian interpolation, or do you think that was a scribal error, or what's your interpretation there?
Scribal error, Christian interpolation, for the most part, bleeds into one. If you have somebody who puts in a little note that says Jesus Christ, called Christ, this guy in specific, eventually that little note's probably going to make its way in there. Seeing as we don't have the printing press, and the oldest manuscript that we have from Josephus would date to the 11th century, found in a Catholic monastery, I would imagine that it'd be fairly easy for a little note to get over into, or a little footnote to get into the actual text. But there's multiple problems as to why that wouldn't be the Jesus of the New Testament, anyways. But
How do you think the
that's
passage?
probably an interpolation.
How do you hold that the passage originally read then?
Either it just said Jesus, son of Damnius there, or it just said Jesus.
Okay, so in Josephus' writings, he doesn't normally, or in fact, I'm not even aware of an example where he will introduce someone by their first name, not tell us who they are, and then at the end of the passage, reintroduce them and tell us their title, such as Jesus, son of Damnius. So don't you think the most likely explanation there is that the beginning reference to Jesus is a different Jesus from the Jesus at the end?
Who is James then? Because he just mentions James without any explanation.
James is the person that's the brother of Jesus.
Who is explained later. He's not introducing Jesus, he's introducing James.
James is the brother. James is familiar.
You're telling me that Josephus doesn't. You're telling me that he doesn't introduce anybody without explaining who they are. He's not introducing Jesus there. He's introducing James. He introduces Jesus
he has
later on when
Jesus.
he says son of Damnius.
He tells us who James is. It's the James that's the brother of Jesus, the one called the Christ.
Yes, because he's introducing
That's
James in that line. He's not introducing Jesus, he's introducing James. You are correct.
Yeah, but he wouldn't say James, the brother of Jesus, without telling us what Jesus he's talking about. There's the Jesus
Why
in
would that-
previous
why
paragraphs
would
as
that
well as
be-
paragraphs after. Why would...
In using that logic, he would say James, the brother of Jesus, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Jesus in that passage is simply just... the line there is explaining who James is.
Yeah.
It's not introducing
James
Jesus,
is the
it's
brother
introducing James.
James is the brother of Jesus, and Jesus is the one called the Christ. If that is the same Jesus at the end, that would cause some confusion. I'd be like, what Jesus is this? James, the brother of
explains
Jesus,
who it
who's
is.
Jesus?
No,
it doesn't.
He's explaining who James is. That's literally the first person mentioned in the sentence. It says James, the brother of Jesus. If you want to know who the Jesus is, keep reading. It's literally 4 sentences later.
No, but that's not how Josephus brought people into the story. If there were multiple James in the story, which there is in book 20, there's a Jesus later on in this same book as well as before this paragraph. So he would have to differentiate between the different Jesuses. So why would he just bring someone up and call him Jesus? That would cause confusion.
It doesn't confuse people that read 4 sentences later. Also, again, I want to reiterate, he's not introducing Jesus there. As you even stated, he's introducing James. Jesus is just simply who this person is related to, and then he explains who Jesus is, because the entire passage is a twist. He's literally just saying that Jesus became the high priest. That's the point. In fact, if he was writing to anybody familiar with the story, they would probably know who the high priest was. And so, okay, well, there you go. It's just Jesus. It's not that big of a deal. There's not too terribly many high priests, and you'd probably know who that was if you were familiar with the story. But that being said, Josephus would have been the person who we could look to, who definitively talked a lot, extensively about the Christians. The fact that very clearly we set the testimony of Flavianum aside, and for good reason. But again, he talks a lot about the different sects of Judaism. He doesn't even mention that the Christians are a sect of Judaism. He doesn't even mention, because we've set aside the testimony of Flavianum, he doesn't even mention who the Christians are. In fact, if Josephus had said, using your logic, the idea of putting in the Christ there to explain things, because he apparently never introduces anybody without explaining something, who calls him the Christ? What does Christ mean? What is this? Who are the Christians? He doesn't explain this at all. If he says this James, the brother of Jesus, who's called Christ, the most insane thing there is the idea that someone calls him the Christ. Tell us about that. Why isn't that explained?
Josephus does do that without explaining the term he's using. There are examples of this. Actually, in the same book, if you go up just a few paragraphs, he introduces this guy that becomes a high priest, This guy Joseph, son of Simon, he calls him the cabby, but nowhere in
Who is
his works
Simon?
does he explain what a cabby is.
Who is Simon?
Well, he was
Does he
the
tell
high
us
priest
who
before.
Simon is?
Yeah, he was the high priest before Joseph.
Okay, so
But
it goes Simon
tell
and
us
then
what the
Joseph.
term- he doesn't tell us what the term cabby means, right? So that's not unexpected for him to mention a term like this and not explain what it means.
This is before the Jesus passage, you said?
Yeah, paragraph 196.
So we're talking about the 300s BCE?
I don't know why that's relevant here.
Well, Simon, the son of Onias, was the high priest in Jerusalem in the 300s.
The term cabby is used to
So
designate who
the only
Joseph
reason
guy
I bring
is,
this up,
and it doesn't explain what the term cabby means.
the
So
only
that
reason
can-
I bring
that
this
can
up is
validate
because it's not
exactly-
explaining who Simon is. Simon wouldn't have been the high priest then, unless we're talking about the 300s BCE. And according to you, if he brings someone up who we don't know, he's got to explain who they are.
He says it in the passage. He says, son of Simon, formerly the high priest.
So the one who existed from 300 to 270 BCE?
Finish your last sentiment. That's the end of the.
That's what it
cross-examination.
says in the passage. It says, as soon as the king heard the news, he gave the high priesthood to Joseph, who was called Cabby, son of Simon, formerly the high priest. So he's
And this is
introducing
found
this
in
term
which
Cabby
particular book?
and not explaining what it means.
Okay, I'm gonna cut it off right there. That would be the end of that cross-examination for Sir. We're gonna start the 8 minutes, the last section of the second round of cross-examination for Christ before Jesus. You got 8 minutes, and it will start whenever you say your first word.
All right. So, Josephus is an interesting person. Very interesting. Just for shits and giggles here, you are aware that he mentions Hercules, right?
Yeah, I think he mentions him in reference to like a letter or a book he read. Is that correct?
No, he mentions him in Antiquities of the Jews, same book that apparently mentions Jesus. Book 1, chapter 15 mentions not only Hercules, but he mentions who he fights alongside. He mentions his father-in-law, his wife, and his son. Very clearly, back then, people absolutely did believe in historicized myth. Go ahead.
Not contemporarily though. Not contemporarily. I don't know of any examples where someone put some deity in like a recent historical contemporary setting in antiquity.
I don't know what contemporary you're talking about writing about Jesus.
Yeah, so let's even say that all the records we have about Christianity is like 2nd century.
They are.
Are there
Please
any-
continue.
Are there any examples of someone putting a deity in a contemporary setting within like a century before their writing?
In a contemporary setting?
Yeah, like a generation or two before they're previous to them writing. I mean, usually when these sort of deified figures are talked about, it's like millennia before, or like centuries and
It's
centuries
not a
before they're
deified
writing.
figure. He's a historicized figure.
Right. But it was centuries ago, Hercules, right? I'm saying that's not analogous to Jesus. Jesus is put in a setting of the 1st century, right, during the reign of Pontius Pilate, during the reign of Tiberius, and that's going to be in the 1st century. So that's why it's not analogous to figures like Hercules. I mean, they're writing about stuff in the distant past.
Are we also, we're dealing with people who were very clearly writing about the Old Testament, even the Jews in specific. There would be a good example. of people who are writing and putting things into a historical narrative, trying to establish them as historical when they're just not.
Yeah, centuries prior, though.
Say what?
Centuries prior.
Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even Daniel, like.
So yeah, if you're writing about Daniel in 400, or if you're writing about Daniel in 500, okay. Well, if same thing in regards to Jesus, or people writing about Jesus in the 100s in the 2nd century, they're just writing about a particular belief that they had, and they're trying to put it down. In fact, they're doing a really, really bad job of it. We can see them fumbling with the story of Jesus. Again, the first 2 Gospels published don't have a birth story, and only 2 of the first 6 do have a birth story. And even the first person who gives us the names of the Gospels, he thinks that Jesus lived to be 50. They're trying to put Jesus as a historical person, but they're failing miserably. I mean, just take a look at the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke, which tries to make him historical, more so than even more so than the first 3 Gospels. The Gospel of Luke tries to say that Jesus was born or alive during both the reign of Quirinius, but also the reign of Tetrarch of Abilene, Lysanias, whose reign ended between 40 and 30 BCE. They're just coming up with the concept. They're fumbling with this.
Yeah, obviously, like, they don't have the details correct. I don't know why that's important here. They're trying to write stories about a guy that
a real story. The only way that it gets to the 2nd century as a real story is through some kind of oral tradition that never got written down prior. And this oral tradition would have to be something that would be wildly off and doesn't actually state any real identifying information.
Well,
because
no,
we
I
can
don't.
clearly
I don't
see them coming up with it over time.
Why would it have to be an oral tradition? What's your argument for that?
What other text do you have that would somehow get the story of Jesus from 30 into the 2nd century?
I don't understand the question. What do you mean?
Well, the oral tradition would have to get the story of Jesus from 30 to the 2nd century. If these texts are written in the 2nd century, as you established the hypothetical not long ago, but
I didn't. We're not still on that hypothetical here. I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll go with reality then. My bad. So the texts are written in the 2nd century, and so how do we get the story from Jesus in 30 all the way to the 2nd century? And in fact, even if you don't want to admit to telemetry, how do we get the story of Jesus from 30 all the way to Irenaeus' ears in 185, and he says that he lives to 50?
That seems to be a bigger problem for your theory, not mine. My theory is that we do have text from the 1st century.
We don't have any evidence of that whatsoever.
Well, I just gave you evidence. I talked about the Mark 13 prophecy being rewritten. That would be an example of evidence because that would be more expected under my hypothesis than yours. That's exactly what evidence is.
More expected is not evidence. That doesn't make any sense. Just because you think that a very clear chapter that is only in one particular text, which establishes, which by the way, we already established that I believe that is talking about the Bar Kokhba revolt, and I gave you 2 pieces of evidence as to why it is. I don't know why in specific you're trying to shove that back into the 1st century. That is
because it makes more sense. It makes more sense, and it's more expected that we'd have that if this was a 1st century text. Which again is what evidence is. I don't know how you're using evidence.
You're saying that it makes more sense, but why?
Because the prophecy didn't come true. We were over this in the first round when we talked. The prophecy.
Wait, are you trying to say that Mark was written before 70 or something? That it was a prophecy for the author itself?
No. Although some scholars do argue that. I'm saying that Mark was written.
I mean, if this is an author who is writing after 70 and he's trying to write as Jesus talking to his disciples, then I mean, very clearly this would have to be somebody who is aware that this would have to be a failed prophecy by 70.
No, the failed prophecy is that the desecration sacrilege did not happen after the first destruction of the temple, and that the kingdom of God didn't arrive in the disciples' lifetime. That's the failed prophecy. That's what Luke changes.
So please explain how Jerome was wrong when he talks about the abomination of desolation being the Bar Kokhba revolt. What are you talking about? What do you think it is?
Jerome is 6 centuries later. I don't really give a hoot what he has to say about it.
He's not 6
Finish
centuries
your last
later.
statements.
Jerome is like the year 500, right?
Is that 6 centuries later?
Oh, excuse me, 5 centuries.
Okay, we'll cut it off there. We're going to move to the closing arguments or the closing statements. They're going to be 5 minutes each. Sir, you will go first, and I will start your time when you say your first word.
So I'm not going to take the whole 5 minutes. I'm just going to say a couple things here. I think the point here is that all these pieces of evidence individually can be debated about what we should do with them. But again, the fact that he needs all of his interpretation of all these to be correct makes his theory just infinitely less likely than mine. And that's really what has to be contained with. That's why mythicism, for the large part, isn't really taken seriously. He did bring up that there's some scholars like being sympathetic to it, but not really. I mean, even some of the scholars that he might point to that agrees with the 2nd century dating aren't mythicists, like David Litwa or Marcus Vincent, like Badoon. These guys are not mythicists. They still believe Jesus was a historical figure, and a lot of his dating they disagree with. For example, where he would date like Ignatius's letters, that kind of thing. So there is a lot of debate here on the individual topics, but the fact that the historical Jesus has such a high prior probability is really the issue that mythicists have to contend with. And he didn't even tell me like what reference class he would put Jesus with to determine if the evidence is sufficient and what's expected to similar figures as Jesus. So I just think there's a lot of issues with the methodology that he's presenting here. That's all I want to say.
Okay, so I am ending your time now. You had 3 minutes and 28 seconds left. Christ before Jesus, you're going to have your 5-minute closer. I will start your time when you say your first word.
Sure. Historians who take mythicism seriously: Thomas L. Brodie, Richard Carrier, Raphael Lasseter, Robert M. Price, Thomas Thompson, Philip Davies, Hector Avalos, Arthur Droge, Carl Ruck, David Madison, J. Harold Ellens, Nicholas Peter Allen, Rodney Blackhurst, Derek Murphy, Marion Hillar, Christopher Batch, Charlotte Tuati, Herman Dietering, Zeba Crook, Kurt Knoll, Emmanuel Pfaff, James Crossley, Justin Meggitt, Darren Slade, Steve Mason, Richard C. Miller. This list goes on and on. You can actually find on Richard Carrier's website 44 at the time of his writing of this text, which was in 2022. There have since been multiple scholars that I have talked to personally who get added to this list or should be added to this list who aren't on here. 44 historians who take mythicism seriously. I understand that I am in the minority. Ignatius letters, I don't know where that came from. We use the general dating that is found from the majority of scholarship. Eusebius, who is a known liar and considered by some modern historians to be the worst historian of all time, is the only reason that we date Ignatius somehow early to about 108, 109 for his death. Historians nowadays put it anywhere from 140s to 160s. Ignatius actually absolutely wrote in the 2nd century, the mid-2nd century. It's not the case that I have to have all of this somehow perfect. What's on my side here is not just data science. It's not just, and it's definitely not me guessing. It's the fact that even the text of the New Testament itself sometimes indicates 2nd century authorship. 1 Timothy, as you and I have actually discussed in private, sir. 1 Timothy mentions Gnosticism. It mentions the book Antitheses, which comes from Marcion and is published in the 140s. 2 Timothy mentions Polycarp. It mentions his scribe, Crescens. These are texts that are in the 2nd century. When the church fathers are discussing whether or not circumcision is something that is necessary and ultimately come to the conclusion that no, it's not, they shouldn't have been discussing that. Paul already figured it out in the 1st century, right? Well, unfortunately, like we and me, my co-author, and Nina Livesey, a current scholar at the University of Oklahoma, would say, Paul is nothing more than a pseudonym used by the Marcionite school and published in 144. He's not a real person. He's in the 2nd century. Nina Livesey is not on this list. Jason Badoon, privately, mythicist. I'll go ahead and say it. He can get on to me if he needs to. That being said, there's absolutely a lot of scholars who would line up with this particular position. It's just, again, as I said in my opening, they either work for religious institutions or are funded by religious organizations or have religious students who would absolutely complain to the department heads in order to get them fired or anything like that. That's why Nina Livesey worked until the end of her career to actually come out with a book on Paul that said that he probably didn't exist. Her entire life work was on Paul. She has multiple books on Paul. It's not that it's wishful thinking. This is a theory that has context evidence. This is a theory that has data science, specifically stellometry, that backs it up. And this is not just the argument from silence. The argument from silence, by the way, is not always fallacious. We don't have any stories of George Washington in the 5th century, so could we say it's the argument from silence that George Washington didn't exist in the 5th century? No. We know when we should see the stories. It's the 18th century. So the 5th century is right out. We see the stories in the 2nd century for Jesus. We don't have any in the 1st. The people who should have mentioned him, Philo, Seneca, Pliny the Elder, they don't mention him. They don't mention not just Jesus, they don't mention Paul. There's no non-Christian references to any of the 13 disciples in the New Testament, and there's no 1st century mention of Christians. There's just none. Even if we accept, for some strange reason, your 2nd Josephus passage. He doesn't mention the Christians. And he, in specific, should have been the one who said something. Go ahead.
Oh, that would be the end of your
Okay.
your closing statement. And with that, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, that concludes the debate between Sir Fraley and Christ Before Jesus on was Jesus a historical figure. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. It's an honor to have you both come here and have this discussion about this, and you guys are both educated on this particular topic. There's a lot that can be learned from here. The audience took away a lot. I took away a lot. Jay, if you're there, do you have any words to say about the debate that we just witnessed? But he might be away.
Sure.
Oh.
I think there was a lot of information presented here, and the time allowed, I don't think it was enough to discuss this type of thing because of the plethora of information from both sides being presented.
Yeah, I think Sir and I could probably go for another hour.
Yeah, there were certain topics that should have been fleshed out a bit more, in my opinion, and discussed more. But overall, I think this would be a good start to this conversation, and that the two interlocutors should probably come back and maybe have a second attempt at the debate. But for now, yeah, great job, both guys. And thank you for coming.
Yep, and with that, I will put up the poll so everyone can vote on who they thought won. Of course, me and Jay are not going to declare any winners, but we will post the poll results either tonight or tomorrow regarding the debate. We really appreciate you guys being here. And you guys can stay up on the panel. We're going to allow for like audience conjecture or any questions or any critiques that they might have. So we'll start bringing people up. Anyone in the audience can come up. We got 271 people in here. We'll try to get time for all of you guys.
Dang, that's a lot.
Yeah,
Can I just say a quick thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to thank again Coco, Jay, facilitating this discussion. Jaron doesn't come around like these lives very much. He kind of does his own thing, but I mean, him coming around more often and us having more conversations, that would be good. And I appreciate Jaron having this discussion with me, sharing her stage with me and us talking about this. So I think it was a fun discussion. I would love to have more, so appreciate it.
Yep. I hope that you guys come back. Also, by the way, Christ for Jesus, if you have any other opponents that you would like to debate, feel free to DM me. I will set it up, formal debates, and I will promote it. I do edit and post the promotion videos that get some views, so I can do all of that for you and serve the same thing. Any topic, any opponent, I will promote it and get it out there and host and facilitate the debate. So thank you guys for being here.
I want the head of Deconstruction Zone, Justin.
I think Deconstruction Zone Justin is in this live right now. But I could
Oh, I
also
know he
DM. I could also DM him, and yes, we can set up that debate between both of you guys. That would be amazing.
It's more of a joke. He's not going to say yes.
I mean, you never know. I mean, like, who knows? He might say yes. He might take up the challenge. We'll see how that goes.
No,
But
he's not.
yes.
I'm not saying that he's not going to. No, I'm not saying he's like scared. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he's. Yeah.
Is he a historicist or a mythicist? I don't even know.
I don't think Justin knows.
Well, I saw a video once, and this was a long time ago, and I might have missed the context, but he said he thought that Jesus was a historical figure because of Richard Bauckham's book, but Richard Bauckham kind of argues a more conservative idea of Christianity, that we have eyewitnesses in the gospel. So
Yeah,
I had
that's
to
weird.
something.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do actually
Um,
have a critique.
yeah, go ahead, Angel. You did say that you wanted to say something, and
I do, and we need the things for the poll.
yeah,
Okay.
and really quick, the poll is up. Everyone in the audience, so there's 258 people in here. You can vote for who you thought won. The poll is up, either Sir or Christ for Jesus. But Angel, what you got for me?
So everyone sees Jesus not. Well, we have to always think he is by the name differently.
Ooh.
Depending on where you originally were born, the name's different.
Are you saying like
I was
Yeshua, Yehoshua, Yeshu, that kind of thing, like Hebrew or Aramaic?
I was born in Hawaii, so it was Aka.
Oh,
Do you kind of mean like the image presented about Jesus is different based on where you're from? Is that what you're kind of saying?
I think maybe that's it.
Can we do a Q&A?
We will in a sec. Angel, was that everything that you wanted to say, or did you want to go further with that?
Are you? I'm confused as to what the question was.
Well, it depends on which region you're from. And for me, I'm from Hawaii. So
Mm-hmm.
my way we say Jesus was Aka.
Really?
Yeah. So since military family, it turned into Jesus.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty
That's
cool.
not even. I wouldn't even have guessed that. It's got a hard cuss sound in there. That's weird. That's or not weird. It's different. Different.
I've grown up with different. I kind of like it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. But yeah, let's get to the audience questions. Bob by Blood, you are up here first. So what you got for us in regards to audience questions?
Jaron, can you point to a single document in reference to Greek or Roman manuscripts that has the same literary structure as the Gospel of Mark, specifically that it does not contain choral elements, it does not contain like positions, like choreography? Because to my understanding, the most of our Greek and Roman manuscripts that are specifically having to do with plays actually contain choreography, because those plays are not being given to the audience, they're being given to the cast members.
Right. What about it?
Asking, can you name a single Greek or Roman document that is a play that does not contain these elements, like you're claiming for Mark?
We have multiple variations of Bacchae. Yeah.
Yeah, but does Bacchae contain choreography? Does Bacchae
Not in all the
contain
variations of it,
choral
no.
elements?
Not in all the variations of it, no.
Okay, that's my question.
In fact, so we would also, depending on what all you technically need, we have like the not the mosaic mural that was uncovered in Pompeii here recently that describes like the initiation rites of, or like the practices and whatnot for the cult of Dionysus. And for them, like they wouldn't have like positioning in specific. They just kind of say, this is what we do. This is where they go, that kind of thing. Like they go off into the woods and do this. So it doesn't really have specific choreography listed. It's not a book, it's just like a mural that has some words on it.
But would you agree, and this will be the final question, would you agree that the majority of Greek and Roman plays that we have reference to are going to contain choreographical elements, specifically having to do with, like, because we can also look at plays and we can look at like locations, for example. And plays are normally, they have a couple of locations. They don't span all of Israel like the Book of Mark does. But but would you just agree that the majority of Greek and Roman plays contain choreography?
A lot of them, yeah, but it would be more specific to people who write a lot of plays, like playwrights. Like, for instance, a play that I would write would not have the same kind of good structure or even choreography outlined that like someone like, I don't know, Wright. Is it Frank? No, it's not Frank Wright. Someone who wrote Hamilton or the Book of Mormon, like what Trey Parker and Matt Stone probably had to do for their plays. Like it's just different. Someone who actually does this professionally, someone who does it a lot, that would be indicative of, or that would be something that we would see throughout history. Is we'd see people who would learn how to do it, as opposed to people who are just kind of doing it in the backwoods of Asia Minor for a religion. Oh, did he drop? I guess he left.
Oh, Bye Blood, if you're in the comments, are you okay? Did you drop or something? Regardless, we do have to move on to the next audience member that wants to say something. Precept Mars, you got anything for us?
Question for Christ before Jesus. For your opener, were you eating a shit sandwich because you were full of it the whole debate?
Yeah, it's a sandwich and it tastes like shit because your mom just made it for me.
Okay, well, that was an exchange.
So-
wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
I dropped because I'm not debating Christ before Jesus right now on this topic, and I wasn't gonna, like, if I stayed up here, I'd probably not have self-control to do the debate. But here, how about this?
Please,
Jaren.
I can only get so erect.
So how about this though, Jaren? For the audience, how about I challenge you to a debate on whether or not Mark is a play? Just asking.
Why?
Because it's your claim, and I hold a different position. That's the negation of that claim.
I would be excited to host it. Yeah. Would you want to take that on?
Yeah, it's up to
Kind of
Jaren.
sounds like a call out there, Jaron. What do you think of that?
Maybe. I'll take it into advisement. I'll let you know. I'll be in your DMs.
Okay, appreciate it.
Absolutely. And yeah, DM each other, DM me, and we can set it up. I'll
Wait.
promote it as always.
I just don't know if there's enough in there to actually do a full debate.
I missed
Yeah,
part
that
of
is-
what just happened. Did Jaron just admit to eating a shit sandwich?
No, I admitted to eating a sandwich that tasted like shit.
Oh, how do you know what shit tastes like?
Because I've been living in Precept's mom's house for the last year.
Okay.
Anyway, next guest, Jeff for Truth. You got anything to say to both of the
Hey,
contestants?
it's Jeff.
Comments, critiques, or any questions?
Yeah, good job, Jaron. You definitely won. The last time I looked, you had like 75% votes for you.
Oh,
And
hold
I've got a
up.
question for Sir.
Knowing the numbers yet.
Go ahead.
if Jesus was a real person, and I believe you think that he wasn't a superhuman who performed all these miracles, is that correct? So who would make up these mythical stories about Jesus if he was a real person? But so who and why would they create these fictional stories about him?
Well, the same reason why they did for everyone else they wrote biographies and lives about. That's just what
No.
ancient.
So they
That's just
made
what.
supernatural
That's
stories
just.
about leaders and Caesars because they
That's
wanted to establish their authority, to establish Caesars as divine. They
yeah, and the
never
people that are
deified
writing about
a common
Jesus are
man
trying to
who
establish
didn't
him.
accomplish anything.
Or let's try to keep it
Well,
like
to
one
the
at a
people,
time so the
to the
audience can
people
hear what's
writing
being
about,
said.
listen, to the people writing about him, he wasn't a common man. He was the center of their religious worship. So that's the reason why.
Do you think Jesus was not a common man? He wasn't even an
Not to the,
official in the Jewish
not to the
culture.
people, not
Was
to the
Jesus
people
a
writing about
rabbi?
him. No,
Oh, sorry, one
not
at
to
a
the
time.
people writing about him. Did not think he was a common man. No.
So who was it? Was it Jews that wrote about Jesus?
There might have been some Jewish influence, sure, like Paul and other
But
people. Yeah.
Paul was most definitely, whoever he was most definitely a Hellenized Jew who was anti-Judaism because his whole message was that Judaism has passed away and is no longer applicable.
And let's have that be the last question because we do need to get to everybody. But
Well, so
Yeah, I was going to say
let
that
me
this is
I didn't
fast
get an answer
becoming.
to my question. So
Jeff, hold on for a
who
second. This is fast becoming a second debate
wait,
within the
Yeah.
debate.
he didn't answer my
So
question. Who created the myths about Jesus and why?
Okay, so he'll answer that question, but we do have to get to everybody. We have like 8 people in the guest request,
Okay.
and keep the time like short. But go ahead, sir. And then we do have to move on
Yeah,
to
it's my
other people.
it's my theory that the religion, if you want to call it that, originally of Christianity, the proto-Christianity, developed from the followers of Jesus to rectify why the kingdom of God didn't come, or why the person they were following wasn't the Messiah, and that later Hellenized Jews like Paul Hellenized the religion.
Okay, and then we'll cut it there. But Jeff, if you want to debate Sir on this, feel free to DM me. I'll promote the debate and I can set it up for you. Work around your schedule and do it on the day where you might be free. But we do have to be fair to the other guest.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you for coming up. I appreciate you being here. Follow me. Kunta, what you got for us?
Question for Christ before, um, Christ before Jesus. And is if Jesus never existed, how do you explain the fact that skeptics and enemies of Christianity in the first few centuries, such as like Roman historians, like Jewish sources, never argued that he was a myth, but instead tried to explain him away as like a sorcerer, a deceiver, or just a failed revolutionary?
So the first time that we get anything from the Jewish people that talks about Jesus was the Babylonian Talmud, which started being written in the 3rd century. By that time, Christianity had become a household name, considering the fact that Lucian of Samosata, who I mentioned in my opening, writing in 166, had said, the Christians, as you know, worship a crucified sage. And he goes on to call them gullible fools and miserable wretches, but nevertheless, he's saying this as if people would know this by the late 160s.
Questions?
We do have a long line, so I'll give you one more question, and then we do.
Didn't I talk to you privately? Didn't me and Matthew talk to you privately?
Yeah, well, my friend John Camden. He
Yeah,
appreciated.
John. I'm still friends with him. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my next question would be, what this means that like if you dismiss Jesus and myth simply because he lived in the ancient world, wouldn't that mean we should also dismiss like other historical figures from antiquity like Socrates, Alexander the Great, and Julius Caesar?
Julius Caesar, we have coins and statues that date to his time period with his face on it. So no, we also have his writings. No, we also have writings about him from contemporaries and to him. So no, Alexander the Great. We have the Babylonian Astronomical Diary, which records his death, which was written during his lifetime, or started being written during his lifetime. And we also have conquests from him, and his name is plastered all over cities in his warpath. We also just found a cloak, which is being studied right now as potentially belonging to Alexander the Great. Now, for Socrates, sure, you want to toss him out? Go ahead. I haven't really studied Socrates enough, but if you give me the same argument that I give against Jesus for Socrates, I will absolutely not only buy your ebook for $3, but I will accept it. I will accept the idea that Socrates didn't exist if you can do the exact same thing I did with Jesus. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead. If not, I don't know why you brought him up.
Okay, thank you.
We'll stop right there. Thank you, Follow Me, for coming up on the panel, and I appreciate you for your debate and also your comment just now. Come back anytime. I'm not gonna pronounce that for TikTok policy. I do want to keep my account intact, but I'm gonna call you D. What do you got for us today? You got anything for us?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Drop them.
Yeah, we're done with it. We're gonna move on to the next guest. Right now, right here.
It's someone's name, I mean.
Say what?
Yeah. My question is for Christ before Jesus.
Who? Someone come up here other than Jeff and ask Sir questions? God,
Okay, my question is for Sir. Why are you so handsome? My second question is for Christ before Jesus.
What? Okay, fine.
Yeah, you said
it better be a handsome question.
Yeah, you said
I got to answer that question.
Yeah, you didn't even answer it.
Go ahead.
Because my beautiful mama made me.
Okay, I accept that. Now, you said in your opening, Christ before Jesus, that there, among theist scholars, biblical scholars, the idea of mythicism is growing in popularity. My question is...
Among theist scholars? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what you said. Maybe that was a miss...
No, like religious scholars, like not like theists themselves.
Okay, so maybe you misspoke or maybe I misheard, but my question is, if the audience was going to look up 3 scholars to better acquaint themselves with mythicism in the literature, who would they be?
Oof, 3 scholars to better acquaint yourself. Be careful with the rest of his writings, or him personally and his political views, but Robert Price is pretty good. Richard Carrier's got a good number of books as well. And I would recommend... does it have to be a scholar, or does it just an author who writes about this, like an expert or researcher? Does it specifically have to be someone within academia or something? Or? Oh, he did? Oh, okay. Well, in that particular case, I would check out David Fitzgerald's book, Nailed. That's a pretty good reference for a lot of like ancient historian works, talking about Josephus, that kind of stuff. He's not a scholar per se, but he has a few books out.
Check out my new movie called Nailed by Mob in My Booty Hole coming out this month.
Nice, J Mike. Nice. Classic.
Yeah, I just wanted to say...
Right in the J Mike.
Well,
I just wanted to ask Coco
if
this was going to be up on YouTube because I missed it, and I just wanted to say, from what I did see, I wanted to give Coco some praise. He did really well.
Yeah. So my question is kind of for both of you. What evidence...
Wait, really quick, I want to respond to that. Wait.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off Kai. I wasn't here to ask a question. I was just like, maybe you had a link or something. You can just DM me later.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's going to be on my YouTube. We're currently live streaming to YouTube, so people are watching it there. I think, well, my YouTube is not that popular, so it's like 1 or 2 people watching it there. But eventually in the night, I'm going to edit it and cut it up, because on YouTube, you're going to see this live stream with like all 3 debates. I'm going to cut them into individual debates and put thumbnails on them, and you'll be able to watch them individually, and they'll be in a playlist. So I can send that to you. And
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm proud of you, man. You handled yourself really well from what I saw. I was really impressed.
Yeah, thank you. I really like this. I want to host more debates like this. This was the goal, to bring like formal debates to TikTok and work with really intellectual and qualified people like Sir and Christ before Jesus. Some people call me the second. What's the channel called? Hold on. Wait. Bear with me. The second. Yeah, people call me the second modern day debate.
Master
but
Flex.
I'm not that. I'm not there yet. It would be awesome to get there, but yeah, like it'd be cool to do that for a living, or maybe for like a side activity. But yeah,
It's pretty awesome that you're the second modern day debates. I think with a lot of work, you might become the first.
I mean, I don't know. Who knows? We'll
Let's
see.
let's do this. Modern day debate is trash. I mean, anyone that takes a bipartisan view on child marriage should just be like totally
Banned from being on there.
blasted. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think modern. I will never go on modern day debate ever.
Oh man, I went on there one time.
Never
Matthew and
support
I went
them.
on there one time. Never.
Thank you for the
again.
coins.
I will never support them. So let's just turn Coco's into the new one, because I don't have any problem with like James personally or anything like that, but I just think anyone that says we're bipartisan and won't say except for this, like if you don't come out and say that, like I'm sorry, like go fuck yourself. Like, and you just had a dude come up in a live debate and like advocate for infant marriage, and you're not gonna like take a stance and be like, we do not advocate what our, what the participants are saying here. They didn't even do that.
Wait,
So I was like, fuck you guys.
What was the context for that? Was it someone like defending Islam or something?
It was that Pikachu guy, Daniel Pikachu or whatever. I don't remember his name. Pikachu. Yeah, and what's awesome, and I'll leave you guys on this. It's a debate with Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy, and Daniel has a laptop up during that debate, and it's a Predator laptop. It's really funny. Oh, no. So,
Thank you for leaving with that. Thank you. That's exactly the image that we want to keep in our minds whenever we think of J Mike until we talk again.
Well, Islam is terrible, so I'm here to bring that up.
Oh, sorry, wrong sound effect.
Coco, what the hell?
Sorry.
What was that? I was gonna leave. But then I was
You
like,
are quickly becoming the third modern day debate.
I'm testing out my new soundboard. I bought it off of TikTok. I might never mind. I might promote the item that I have, but we can go on to the next guest. Or actually, do you have anything else to say, J Mike?
Eat again.
Oh, okay. Mob, do you have any comments, questions, or critiques on the debates that we saw
Thank you,
today?
J Mike.
Yeah, I have a question. Hold on, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. My question is for Christ for Jesus. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm interested in the stylometry thing. So my question is, why do you put so much weight on the stylometry? Like, as far as I'm concerned, people like Eder and Libby say it should not be used to conclude authorship. And for your algorithm, how do you justify using the things you used over other methods, such as feeding books versus like chapters, or using different algorithms? The only feature I think you used was the most frequent words, the 100 most frequent words. Why not use other features like genre or sentence length or a higher n-gram? Or
we did use n-grams. We ran at different n-grams as well. As far as the n-grams go, I mean, the best thing that we found, you'll if you go back and listen to the things that I said in the debate, I mentioned at a certain point in the opening that there are teachings of Jesus that come from the wisdom of Sirach, which is a book in the Catholic Bible. I have with me here a copy of the Catholic Bible. It's very Catholic. And it has the book of Sirach, which when we run the Greek version of it, which was published in the late 2nd century BCE, we find that the stylo package that we run in our studio, it identifies multiple 6 n-gram phrases or sentences that line up with wisdom of Sirach, indicating sourcing. This is on top of other teachings that have been more or less paraphrased from the wisdom of Sirach. So we utilize stylo in different ways. Absolutely.
I think on the Myth Vision podcast, when you guys ran it, I think you used an n-gram of 1, right?
Oh, I mean, you can. I mean, if you're going to increase the n-grams, if you increase them too much, then it's not really going to do anything.
Okay, well, that was just like there's a ton of features you can change because I tried. I installed R and I tried coding my own stylo thing to mimic yours. I used 700 words, chopped it up into 700 words. I put all of Paul's letters in it. I used an n-gram of 1. And then I got a result very similar to yours that you did on the Myth Vision podcast. And then I downloaded 8 different Plato texts in Greek, 6 authentic and 2 fake, 2 forgeries. And I put it in there, and it gave me a bunch of weird results. It put forgeries beside authentics, like in the dendrogram.
Yeah, so in our next project, we're going to be saying that Plato in specific, there's actually very little reason to think that the person actually may have existed, or has at least written anything. Yeah, so that was Plato. Plato is something that we got asked a lot about initially after coming out with the book last March. So we actually started running the works of Plato, and we got those results as well. And so we started playing around with that and finding that there's actually quite a bit to question there for Plato.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, my mind went the other way. It was like, well, we know Plato is right. It must be the algorithm that's the problem. But okay, one more question is I think also in the Myth Vision thing you said Josephus book 17 or sorry, volume 17, 18, 19 came back as not him. I think that's what you guys said.
I think we mentioned that he may have used either a source or it's potential that he used. I guess you could say a scribe or something, but that's probably very unlikely just for random 3 books. It's probably a source material. Josephus actually does mention sometimes that he's using prior sources every once in a while.
Yeah, because that was going to be my question for like things like Paul or the Gospels. Like maybe there might be a certain part in Mark where he had a source that he used, like the Passion narrative or something like that. So it comes back differently. How do you count for like scribes or things like that where they use sources for certain sections and not others?
So as far as the scribes go, a good scribe would look like the person who's actually giving or a good scribe would look like the author, if you will. In some cases, a scribe would be someone the author was dictating to, in which case it should still be the author's words. Also, you have the fact that the author should be going back over what the scribe wrote and maybe making it more their style or editing and just fixing things just before it gets published. Lastly, the scribes, in the case of the New Testament, especially when you run the Greek New Testament alongside anything from Greek from the 2nd or 3rd centuries, you'll start to see that these scribes must have been time travelers. So, like at that point, it's like, okay, I don't think this is a scribe anymore. I hate to, you know what, a broken clock is right twice a day. Bart Ehrman talks pretty extensively about how scribes, the idea of Paul using scribes or amanuenses or anything like that is complete total BS. He hates the idea that scribes were used for by the Christians.
Okay, interesting.
So he does a lot of writing about that.
Okay, with that, we do have to get to the other guest.
All right, no worries. Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
That's awesome today, guys.
Yeah, my questions are super quick.
I gotta roll out, but Cyber, I gave you a shout out on AXP today. I mentioned you by name.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hey, it's awesome.
All right. I'll see y'all.
Cyber's like, your check is in the mail.
Yeah, your check's in the mail. No. You gotta give a shout out to the good people out there, man.
Yeah, so my question's super simple. One, it's good. Both you guys can answer it. But the first one is just for you, CB. Is there any evidence that would have you change your position?
Yes.
Yes, and what would that be?
Evidence, the best thing would probably be some evidence that dates to the 1st century, which mentions Jesus in a mundane way.
Okay.
That'd probably be the best kind of material. The most likely thing would be like an arrest record or a crucifixion record or something that dates to the 1st century that says, hey, we on Wednesday or Friday, depending on which version of the Bible you read, we We crucified two thieves alongside this rebel instigator or this, religious instigator or something named Yeshua or something. That would probably be the best thing, the most likely thing that we'd find. Another thing that would really kind of throw a wrench into the whole machine here is the text that they're starting to find and translate and decipher using AI. Found in Pompeii. A lot of things that had been burned before and we can't read them too well, they're starting to use AI programs to try to figure out what they say. And here recently, my co-author of our book, Christ Before Jesus, Matthew, and I, we were taking a look at the most recent book that had been, or text that had been translated. It's something to do with like philosophy or something. But he turned to me when we were looking at it and said, "Hey, it's this type of stuff right here that would prove us wrong. Like finding some text that we just don't have any access to before." And I am not Bart Ehrman. I'm not going to poison the well and say that anyone who disagrees with me is a fool. I'm going to say that in the future, I could be proven wrong. Yeah, absolutely. But I wait that day with bated breath.
And sir, you can answer this one. Because Jesus is, I would hold him as God. I'm Christian. But do you guys think that a scholarly consensus on the non-existence of Jesus would have any impact on Christianity, sir?
Like, do I think that would move people away from being Christian?
How large do you think the impact would be on Christianity if there was just a
think
scholarly consensus on the non-existence?
I don't think Christians are motivated to be Christians based on what secular scholars say about Jesus, because if they were, they wouldn't be Christians, because the secular scholars don't agree with kind of the portrayal and idea that churches or Christians portray about Jesus. So I don't think it would impact it one way or the other.
For answering my question, and sir definitely won. I saw the poll. I don't know what the atheists in there, but thanks for having me, Coco. And CB, you did a good job too. Take care, man.
Definitely. You're welcome up here anytime. And if you want to debate somebody, let us know. Next guest, I think it was Cyber first, then Forrest. But Cyber, you got any questions, comments, or critiques?
Yeah. So just to pay back, Jaron, how did you get so sexy? But the serious question is,
let me answer it. Sir's beautiful mom. No. Oh, I had to. It's just in my nature. I'm sorry. It's the hat. It's the hat, as Double Donkey Jesus in the chat says. It's the hat.
And my follow-on question would be as stellometry, kind of a two-part question. Do you foresee it being used more given the recent updates to it, breakthroughs with it? And two is, what impacts do you think we will see with this with religion across the board?
Oh, so as far as the utilization of stellometry, I would say that it's probably going to be used more. We're starting to see more about it. It's just, when you look at the Venn diagram, and one circle has people who are interested in religious topics, and then you have a circle that's people who are interested in data science and can run stylometric analysis and everything, or take the time to learn how to do it, or take the time to just do it. They don't overlap very much, and as a result, we just don't see a lot in there. As Mark Bilby said, we need more data scientists within religious fields, the religious topic. So I think it's something that is going to continue to grow, especially since here recently the computational stylistics group, the scholars behind Stylo, which is the software we use, have said that you actually don't need as much data in order to get accurate runs, and so they came out with 700 words, and they said this is how many words you generally need. Since the average chapter of the New Testament is literally 696 words, it's it's pretty obvious that people need to be digging more into this and can. And so I would expect that people will, and I don't know where religion will pivot, because I'm sure it will, but we'll see it kind of impact. Our next project after the New Testament, our next project that we're wrapping up with is over the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Old Testament. And so I know that I've already started ruffling feathers in those particular communities. So.
All right. And just real quick, J Mike, I appreciate that shout out. Anyways, I'll hop down.
All right. Thank you so much for your candor. Forrest, what you got for us? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for hosting. I just want to let you know that if you didn't let me up, I was going to vote for Ross Soul regardless, and I'd rather unalive myself than do that. Just to comment, great job to everybody that participated in this, because it was really good. Minus, Christ before Jesus wasting time with that shit sandwich. However, he does love shit sandwiches objectively because he likes Joe T. Garcia's. I'd like to give Christ before Jesus a moment to just think about this too. Would you rather recant your statement about P. Mars's mother, or your opinion on Joe T. Garcia? I'd need a definitive answer.
I would rather recant my statement on Joe T. Garcia.
All right, you've lost all my respect again. May I turn my camera on to show my new kitten?
Yes, but please do not get the live band. We are trying to do a professional.
Absolutely will not. I just got a new cat. It's my first pet ever, so just wanted to show you. He's really cute.
Okay, go for it.
I think I did it. Oh, he's literally going crazy. Oh, he's going wild. His name's Bob. I don't really like his name, but he's an orange cat, so he's going crazy. Also, yeah, I think that was it. I just want to share with my cat.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you, Forrest. You've been a supporter for a while. I appreciate you, man. You're always cheering me on everywhere I am.
Yeah, and Coco, please, you got this. I know you got this.
You're the best, man.
I had a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jesse. Sorry, I know you were early. I skipped you on accident because my brain is like doing tricks.
It's okay. So I still remain like apathetic toward the existence or non-existence of Jesus. So I just wanted to ask both of you to recommend a book, just a book outside of Jesus' existence. Like, what would you recommend? A recommended reading that you guys have read recently outside of Jesus.
I can go first. So one thing I would recommend, it's not specifically about the existence of Jesus, but it is a book that argues a lot of context on where to date Mark. And that's going to be Michael Koch's book, Gospel Between the Margins, where he kind of goes through the different arguments for dating the Gospel of Mark and why he dates Mark to the early 70s. He also talks about where to date Ignatius, Papias, those kind of guys. So I think that would be a book I would recommend to check out. It's also easy to digest if you haven't stepped into studying any scholarly work on the topic.
Thank you. What about you, Jared?
So are you saying a book outside of like religion or something?
Just any book. Any book.
Any book?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Let's see. Anything from maybe
Could be a comic book.
Frederick Ingalls. I would say maybe Flight from Sherman Alexie.
Okay. I appreciate it. I was just getting a palate cleanser.
Bet. Okay, next person we got is Tiny Smalls or Tiny Science.
Are you next, Coco? Do I need to stay up here to keep time?
Yeah, I think me and Russell might still.
Okay, I'll stick up here unless you want to drop me.
No, you can stay up here.
I'll even here.
He was floating around. I've seen him a couple times.
I don't think he's going to show up.
I think if he didn't argue, he'd probably receive more votes.
But I don't know. But Tiny Science, what do you got for us?
I wanted to ask Sir a question. Is there any, what is the utility or pragmatic benefit of believing that Jesus existed as a human? What would that serve? What purpose would that serve?
Well, I just think that true. I just think it's the case. So that's why I'm inclined to believe it. In terms of how you could utilize that, I think a lot of the arguments presenting Jesus in a historical context as a human, if we look at the scholarly work and kind of what the sources say, is actually pretty damning to Christianity. So, I mean, if you're looking for an answer like that, like how we could utilize it, that would be one way. In terms of another thing I think it does is I think a lot of the mythicism debate, I think a lot of it's kind of confused because I think a lot of it's like just bad probability assessment. So that's why I would be inclined to not like sway my opinion that way.
Okay. Thank you for your question and for your comment. We appreciate it. Slurms McKenzie, what you got for us?
I'm Slurms McKenzie. Unfortunately, I missed the debate, so I'm sad about that. I'm gonna have to do a rewatch. Considering my biases here, I'm gonna assume Sir won, but I do agree with a lot of what I've been hearing about. I've told you this before, Jaron, but I mean, you are a very good-looking man. I don't think it's just the hat. You're just, you got something there. I really wanted to say, Forrest, congratulations on the new kitten. He's adorable. I love Bob. I'm with you on not loving the name, but I think, I don't have the context of the debate, so Bob is the clear winner for me in this moment. But I look forward to watching it because good topic. And that's it. Again, this is Slurms McKenzie. I'm going to leave now because I'm driving home from work. Love you guys.
Don't you mean you're a passenger? You're a passenger on your way home.
It doesn't matter. I'm
I
leaving.
love the
moron.
TikTok shop. The TikTok shop is awesome. Love the TikTok shop.
We definitely, absolutely.
That was Slurms McKenzie, guys. That was Slurms.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
we could plug the TikTok shop. I've bought in microphones and sound cards from TikTok. Yes, everyone should shop from the TikTok shop. And all guests on this live are safe while they're on this live.
Yeah, the TikTok shop saved a family. The TikTok shop saved a family of 7 the other day from house fire. So
absolutely.
Slurms McKenzie from TikTok actually supports the TikTok shop in many different ways. So shop at the TikTok shop, everyone. We love it.
I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords.
Wait, I'm not sure about all that. But Dizzy, what you got for us?
Yeah, I just want to build off of one of the previous questions and ask, do you think it would be more detrimental to Christianity if Jesus did exist historically, but was, proven not to do any supernatural works, or more detrimental if he didn't exist at all?
Who is that question to me or Jaron?
Either or both.
I think
I
that,
need to hear the question again. I don't remember. I thought it was a question to you, so I checked out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think maybe more or less it was. I think there's ways, like if you're a mythicist, you could present a case against Christianity either way. But I just want to preface this with, we shouldn't be believing things just because they're bad for Christianity. We should just be believing things because they're true. When I was asked earlier about, what kind of utility could be gained from arguing Jesus was a historical person, kind of the things that are talked about in the sources and what Jesus was is detrimental to Christianity. You could use that as an argument. Whether it'd be easier to argue from a mythicist standpoint, I'm not really sure, because someone could just be a Christian and believe Jesus is some sort of celestial beings. We have people that believe that on TikTok. So, I mean, someone could just move their denomination or their beliefs about Jesus to sort of a different area. So I don't necessarily think one would be better than the other to argue against Christianity.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your question. We appreciate it. Come back anytime. You're always welcome here, Dizzy.
Thanks.
Let us know if you want to debate with anybody.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Wait, what you got for us?
My question's for Sir.
Go for it.
When you point to God, and then you point to, I'm just kidding. I really don't have a question. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Sorry.
And we'll be waiting on that. Russell,
wait,
if you're in the live, let us know, Russell. If you're in the live, that will entail what the next events are.
Where the fuck is this rat Rasul?
I don't know.
He's always dodging people. Where is he at?
But yeah, Russell, if you
Likes to run a lot. That's why he's always out of breath. It's because he's always running.
Well, I'm not too sure about that, but Russell, yeah, if you're in the live, that will dictate what events end up happening next. Technically, he's not supposed to be here till 10, given the rescheduling of.
What's the debate prompt? Is it the problem of evil?
No, it is whether the tag argument is a good or intellectually honest argument.
Okay. Not sure what that even means. Like good, like in the sense that it's convincing?
Or justified or sound or valid.
Okay.
But,
all right. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But wait, Dizzy, you guys got anything else for us? We got 3 more guests we got to get to.
No, I'll drop.
Okay. Thank you for coming up.
Between bringing up the next guest, I'd like to make a short commercial break. There is 202 people in here. Let's get Coco up to 150, and then after that, we can shoot for the 200 and break another personal record for this particular platform. Thank you very much. This message is approved by me.
Yep. Everyone, please tap your screens. Yeah, we're breaking records. Like, for the Day of Debates. For the Day of Debates event, we had what was it, like 6 debates, 7 debates, and we got 100K likes. Then for the Day of Debates 2 event, we had less debates and we got 130, 150 likes. And so in this debate, we've only had like 2 debates and we've broken 114 likes. So wow, just exponentially more likes given the amount of debates that we're hosting. So we really appreciate that. But Marjorie, you're up. What comments, critiques, or questions
I
you
have a statement and a challenge request, but it could just, could be declined. My challenge request could be declined. But yeah, so I am an atheist. So part of the reason why I became that way was just simply because of the contradictions that I read in the Bible and many of the stories. When you read them through, you see the contradictions. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, alrighty. But I think the people that could sort of weave the Bible together did not did not foresee that we would have tools in order to decipher certain, we can now detect where some of the stories in the Bible, where they came from, what they were inspired by, the pieces of the stories that they took borrowed from other stories. I don't think they foresaw that we would have the tools in order to do that. So that's why I think data science is a very, very important tool for not only just for the Bible, but for many other kinds of writings. I wanted to ask Jaren. I've been on one of your lives before, and you did a show and tell for me, but I don't know if you would be open to doing it again. But I remember one time I came on your live and I asked you if you could calculate, like, if the story of Moses was true, and the flood actually did happen, like, how many people would be on Earth today if that story was really true. And it was something like 100 million. And I was just like, I remember when you plugged the information in and you like put the math and did the math, I was very surprised to see that. But like, I don't think that the people when they wrote the Bible knew that, like, fast forward to 2,000 years later, that we would actually be able to actually see. Mhm.
Oh, no, you're good. Continue.
Okay, so my
Keep going.
challenge is to see to Jaren. I don't know if you would want to do a show and tell on that.
Sure how well I'd be able to. Normally when I go live, I'm on like a computer and everything, and I can like bring up my screen, but I'm on a phone for this thing because you can't join other people's lives on your computer. But yes, I do know what you're talking about, and there's kind of two parts to that I wanted to mention. So first of all, yes, you are correct. If the population of the Earth, or if the Bible is to be taken literally, and the population of the Earth goes down to 8 people, it gets bottlenecked down to 8 people. There at the time of Noah's Ark, using the conservative Christian biblical timeline of history, the population of the Earth just would be a mere fraction of what it is today. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Not to mention the exodus out of out of Egypt. The number of the Israelites who left Egypt would have been more than the entire Earth's population, which again doesn't make any sense. So you are correct, and that goes into my the other point that you had brought up. The people who are writing this just don't know that there's going to be something in the future that is able to detect whether or not they wrote things, where they got their sources from, that kind of stuff. Archaeology at the time just wasn't really too much of a thing. Yeah, and it's funny kind of to think about when my co-author and I were writing Christ Before Jesus, we kind of thought, there's these people who were probably working by candlelight in the middle of the night to write these books under the guise or under the pseudonym of Paul or something, and they never could have dreamed that halfway across the planet, 2 dirt farmers from Texas would be able to use something called a computer to figure out that they were writing it and not Paul. So, yeah, never saw it coming. Never saw it coming.
That's all I wanted to point out. Thank you so much. It was a great debate. Good night, guys.
Absolutely. You're welcome here anytime. Thank you for coming up. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Right.
And I guess right here, right now, you can go.
Yeah, I've noticed a pattern where only one of these guys is getting questions, so I'm here to freshen it up a little bit. My question is for Christ Before Jesus, and my question is, are disjunctive syllogisms inclusive or exclusive in prop logic?
Could you repeat that, but in like modern day English?
Yeah, are disjunctive syllogisms inclusive or exclusive in prop logic?
That would be irrelevant to my field of study. Thank you.
I grant that.
Okay.
The rhetorical outpacing. Relax.
Thank you for that. Yeah, like guys, like relax with the philosophy and logic tonight. So I am trying to get to that Rasul debate and see like how that goes for me and Rasul. So I'll take like maybe some people who haven't been up here that often. I see you bought by blood, but Tiny Science. Thank you for being here, Tiny Smalls.
I honestly don't have much longer, but I gotta hop off in just like a couple minutes.
Okay, that's totally fine. If you need to go now, even that's good. But
well, it's fine. When's the next debate? Is the next debate at 10?
Yeah, it's gonna be at about 10.
Oh, okay.
10:20.
Okay. Well, I just have a couple minutes here. I gotta go put the kiddos to bed.
Okay. But yeah, thank you for staying here as long as you have, and yeah, you're free to go at any time. Yeah, we genuinely appreciate you answering all the questions and being here for as long as you have.
Yeah. And thank you, by the way, for hosting. Thank you to you, to Jay, to everybody who makes this possible. The mods there for you guys. Thank you very, very much for having me up. You know what? I'll even thank Sir for, for not only showing up, but I think you mentioned somewhere in there. I think I heard that you had read my book, which is nice. So thank you.
Yeah, I actually had some stuff ready for stylometry, but I didn't want to go into it if you didn't want to. So
Well, generally speaking, considering the fact that some people who are outside of the data science field don't either understand stylometry or have questions about it or don't trust it or whatever, I generally will try to avoid bringing that up. I feel like I can do a decent job without bringing it up.
I bet. So, PhD and ADHD, you've got the floor. Any comments, questions, or critiques?
Yeah, so my question was for Christ before. So it's more of a pragmatic and strategic question. Usually, when I'm in debates with theists, I grant the existence of a historic Jesus. Like, it doesn't really hurt the philosophical thrust that I'm kind of coming from. And I wonder if you feel like that's a mistake, and that's why you kind of focus on the lack of historical evidence, or what are your thoughts there? Maybe I'm missing something.
Are a good number of amazing debaters, dare I say, masters at it, that refrain from saying that Jesus did not exist. They refrain from saying that because they will generally at least throw a bone to people who come in and they say, "Hey, I'm a theist. I believe in God and everything," and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. It allows for a conversation that doesn't just immediately go towards Jesus and whatnot. You can just keep it on the the topic of God. So I don't really have a problem with it. I don't think that that's disingenuous or anything, unless you are a mythicist and you're just straight up just refusing to to state that you're a mythicist. That's kind of weird, but it's not really a problem. People just kind of do their own thing. Believing that Jesus existed is not necessarily offensive to me. I don't really find that really to be a problem per se. It's just I want to believe as many true things as possible, and I want to not believe as many false things as possible.
I think there's a huge difference between believing that a guy named Jesus historically existed. Like, there's a lot of different commitments from that compared to this guy was actually the Son of God. And so I find myself leaning towards, hey, I'd rather defend the one that I know is much more defensible than the one that is much more entrenched in several layers of history and debate, and there's a lot of scholars that are going to disagree with me. Do you understand kind of where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say that here in the next, I'd say 2 decades, 20 years from now, that wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't have to worry about, I've got to make sure that I don't say that Jesus didn't exist because most scholars disagree with me. I'd say in the 20 years, it's probably going to be different.
Really?
Yeah, 20 to 30 years. I'd say 5 to 10 years, we're looking at people scholars actually starting to say, hey, this is second century stuff. I mean, that stuff's already been.
Man, I wish.
Now, Carrier was making that claim
on that. I would love to bet on that.
Yeah, I would too, because Carrier was making that claim like 10 years ago. That 10 years in a decade, he was like, a decade in the future, people are going to be, and to some extent, there has been an expansion of mythicist positions, but like by 1 percentile, you know what I mean? And so that's interesting. But no, but the question that I would have, okay, so it's more like why, right? Strategically, why focus on the actual historicity instead of all the other things that are easily like shown to be incorrect?
Because I don't generally like to talk about supernatural stuff. I don't know about Sir, but I mean, once you start bringing in supernatural claims, the sky is square and colors taste funny. Like it just, you could do anything. You could do anything. So I don't like existing in something that's not reality or talking about something like that.
Okay. Nope. Fair enough. All right. Well, hey, I'll
Well,
drop
I
off.
just want to
Appreciate it,
say,
guys.
I just want to say one quick thing about the kind of the field and kind of this suggestion that it's moving toward mythicism. I actually think the opposite is true. I mean, mythicism was actually pretty popular 100 and so years ago. It's actually moved the opposite direction.
You know
So
why,
I would not
right?
say,
That's an absolutely true statement. Do you know why?
yeah, because our scholars started arguing to put Jesus in this context of apocalyptic preacher.
Yeah. Do you know why?
Why do you think Jesus is an apocalyptic
Why
preacher?
was it so popular about 100 years ago, and then all of a sudden it stopped? There's a political reason as to why. Do you know why?
Oh, you think, what's the political reason
Because the vast majority of people who were behind that particular mythicist argument were people who were on the other side of the wall. That literally, we have Soviet authors, we have Chinese authors who absolutely were pushing forward this particular field of study. And after the Cold War, during the Cold War, they absolutely decided to switch the other direction. There's a ton of information and text that have been buried that absolutely we used as a springboard because we could stand on the shoulders of giants who came before us in the field of
But some
mysticism.
of
And
some of
that
the
was something that was
arguments,
buried for political reasons.
a lot of the arguments used by those scholars are the same arguments that are used today.
The arguments that were used back then for mythicist arguments are the ones that we use in specific. In fact, you go back to say even the 1800s with people who you go back to the 1800s. You have like F.C. Bauer, who was saying well before computers or anything like that the epistles of Paul, there was only 4 of them that could have been written by Paul. And he names the exact same ones that we find from a stellometry standpoint come back as Paul, even bits and pieces of them. We are
my only point,
F.C. Bauer in that regard, and Johann Streck, who also took a look at that, realized
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is starting to go right back into a debate, and we want to.
Praise God.
We don't
Love
want
you
that
guys.
to happen. So, Shark, did you have anything to ask or?
Yeah, unlike every other guest, I'm just going to be quick with my questions. Hopefully in the future, the guests come up and have the comprehension to just ask one question and then move on. Sir, to you, do you think you won this debate sincerely?
I mean, from a technical standpoint, yeah. I mean, I don't think you really presented a case that sort of unifies the evidence we have for Jesus.
Thank
to
you.
present a case where Jesus pre-existed as a celestial being.
Thank you. Final question, and then the next debate is going to start. Christ before Jesus. If stellometry could be used to prove that you don't exist, then what?
Stellometry used today to prove that I don't exist?
Yeah, if an individual, company, corporation could prove stellometry, could use stellometry to prove that you don't exist, what would you do, say, or act upon?
In no way, shape, or form do I say stellometry proves that someone doesn't exist. That's not a claim of mine. So that's an asinine question.
So you don't use stellometry to, well, that would be a second question, but okay. I guess I misunderstand what you mean.
Well, without you having to ask a question, I do not say that stellometry just somehow spits out an answer that says that Jesus doesn't exist. That's not a claim of mine.
Okay, yeah. If I misunderstood that you saying that stellometry
all
demonstrated...
stellometry does is give a backbone for the theory that these texts are 2nd century and gives us an idea as to, or a solid foundation for why we're looking in a particular century as opposed to the first.
Got you. Maybe I misunderstood because I thought that you said that you're using stellometry to demonstrate that it's likely that Plato didn't exist either.
No, well, I corrected that, and I said that there's reason to doubt that he existed, but what I ended up correcting it to was that if he did, he didn't write anything.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of the reason why we think Plato existed is because of text of his, but if we can show that there are actually a bunch of different authors and whatnot, then it's unlikely that he either existed or that he existed and wrote.
I mean, our texting, our way of communicating could change over time, but it's all good. Results
It
here.
wouldn't change over the period of time that he was writing. In fact, we used within known authors, we used different time periods of 40 to 50 years, a range of writing, and it still came back with a 98% accuracy.
Gotcha.
So, like for instance, Paul writes over 15 years, so it wouldn't change there.
Oh, I think writing styles could change over the course of just 1 year, but it's all good.
It wouldn't be something that Stilometry would have a problem with, not at all.
Gotcha.
Also, Jay, you're on Coffee Cup. I'm only saying that because I know that you use part of the background is on your screen too. Like we can hear you when you talk, Jay, but like you're still on Coffee Cup.
Oh, is Jay talking?
I'm on Coffee Cup?
Coffee Cup.
Oh,
That's
it's
weird.
10. I apologize, guys, for staying over. But again, thank you to anybody who has watched and asked questions, and thank you very much to Controversial and to Jay and everybody here on the panel.
Yep. Thank you guys for both being here. We really appreciate it. And yeah, feel free in the future to anytime, any topic, request for more debates.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Okay.
Am I still on Coffee Cup?
Oh, it's back now.
That's so weird. My phone is so stupid.
Okay, so well, ladies and gentlemen, those are those two debates.